Hello everyone, I am back again and I'm going to show you how to continue on with using the foam to make a missing piece of fiberglass body. It took me a while to get all of my stuff. This is all the stuff that all the stuff that I've used to do what I'm doing. So what I did was I have my piece of foam that I cut to shape, and so it goes right here. And it also goes underneath this lip right there. Also, sorry, I'm coming off of a cold. If you put it over here, it's a mirror image. The advantage of doing this is the difference between this surface and this surface is this thickness, less than a ½ inch. The advantage of using this approach is I can't be off any more than a ½ inch between this side and that side because there's only a ½ inch difference between. So ideally I'd be less than ½ inch, and in fact let's say half of ½ inch, so 1/4 inch. So even in the worst case, I would be off a 1/4 inch from this side to this side if I was really horrible about shaping this. I'm not really horrible, so let's take half of that again. You know, we're talking about an 1/8 of an inch at most difference between the curve of this surface and the curve of this surface by the time I'm done. So that's one of the advantages of using this approach and using a thin piece of material is you can't be off by any more than the thickness of material. It's either no material or the whole material or somewhere in between. All right, so let's look at what I did. And again, I did all this ahead of time so I would be prepped, so as I'm recording it won't take forever. You don't have to watch me do what I did. I took this pattern right here. One thing I did was I took the sheet that I took this from and traced it onto that sheet. So when I cut it off, I know it's an exact copy of this. And that's what I'll use over here. So again, because it's an exact copy, at least I know the parameters are the same. Then what I did was I took this pattern, cut out the fiberglass for this, the material. So I cut out 2 layers of the fiberglass mat and then 1 layer of the fiberglass cloth. Now the first layer of the fiberglass mat is a little bit smaller, so I'll put it down there. The reason why is because this has to taper from having fiberglass down to this surface. So what I did was the first layer is going to be a little bit up here, the next layer is spot on where this line is, and then the third layer, the cloth, is going to go a little bit past. So it'll taper down to that. There was no point in making all 3 of these exactly the same size because then there would be a step at the edge that I'm going to have to get rid of anyway. I didn't want to do that. Another thing is when I did this, when I sprayed the orange, I sprayed the orange right on top of the gel coat. Gel coat has wax in it and the wax floats to the surface, so you have to at least sand it a little bit to get rid of the wax, or use some grease and wax remover or something to make it so that whatever's on there will stick. What I did was I sanded this with 36 grit just to rough up the surface. This is all going to be covered by fiberglass, so the sanding scratches, which are deep, don't really matter. In fact, they actually help for it to adhere. The reason why I left these pieces right here, I want to show you what I did. So I drew this line and it was on top of the paint. If I sanded all this off, I would completely lose that line. So rather than do that, I sanded it in spots. And then in between, as soon as I sanded it down, then I took my marker and marked where the line used to be. Then I went to the next spot and I did this periodically. I spaced it out. Then what I did the next phase is I went in and said, okay, the pieces that are still there, I need to get rid of them. The reason I left this here was to show you that because I didn't prep the surface, it should take quite a bit of work to get this paint off. It should be stuck to this gel coat rather well. If you watch, it comes off really easy, okay? If I would have put the fiberglass on top of that, then it's going to break at the weakest bond. That's a really weak bond. So not only do I need to get rid of the orange, I need to rough up the gel coat. There we go. So now I've got roughed up gel coat, okay? So like I said, then I'll take my marker. I always keep markers in my back pocket. Now I'll replace that line that I just sanded off. There we go. All right, do the next section, okay? Once again, sand it. Once again, it comes off way too easy. I always try to sand in a cross hatch, so I'll cross sand one direction, and then I'll go 90 degrees to it. Now here, where you see these dark spots, remember underneath this gel coat is fiberglass. So these dark lines that you see, that's where I sanded through the gel coat down to the fiberglass. If I really cared, I would completely sand through the gel coat down to the fiberglass. But again, I'm going to make a mold out of this so it doesn't have to last 20 years. If I didn't do this, if I was going to keep this, then I would go ahead and do the extra work. But in this case, there's no need. All right, and so here you can see that that was really thin anyway, because it went down to the fiberglass. So once again, I put my line back. This line will ultimately be covered up. The only reason I'm doing this is because when I sand this edge, I'm going to feather this down. I want to know where I first determined this was, because if I see this blue line when I'm sanding, then I know, uh-oh, I'm getting really close to that edge. I want to be careful and not sand too much more. All right, let's see. Some of the things I've done is I've used these screws to hold things together. These are 3-inch screws. You saw me use these the last video. They're way too long, but sometimes I need them. Oh, these are 3-inch. 1 5/8 ones here. These are for things like right here. There was no point in putting a 3-inch screw here, so I used an 1 5/8 screw to hold that down. The other thing I use is a little self-drilling screws. That way I don't have to have a drill bit, drill and redo it. I can just do it all in one. This is a number 8 by 5/8. One of the reasons I use these is because I have one of these, screwdrivers with the tips that come off. Well, it just so happens that not only does this tip work in the screw, but if I pull off the tip, the hex right here is the same size as the 5/8 hex. So that means that's one less tool I have to worry about keeping track of. The only disadvantage is I do have to keep track of this tip when I take it off and use this separately. I have misplaced it. All right, what else do we have? Oh, hot glue gun. What I'm going to do is I am going to hot glue this foam down to here. One of the things is that I'm also going to use Gorilla Glue. I've used Gorilla Glue in the past. One of the disadvantages, it is a foam and it does expand when it cures. It's not a big deal because of what I'm doing here. In a critical area, you wouldn't want to use this because of it expanding as it cures. In this case, I'm going to cover it with fiberglass anyway, so even if it tries to expand, the fiberglass is going to contain it. But if it wasn't in a contained area, it would expand. I taped this edge right here of the actual C8 deck lid, trunk lid, because I don't want to sand it, I don't want to screw it up, I don't want to get fiberglass on it, so I put tape on it. I use masking tape just because it was handy. You can use masking tape, you can use clear box tape, you can use duct tape, whatever you want, just something to keep you from sanding through it or having the fiberglass attached to it. This is my sanding block, one of the many that I use. This happens to be 36 grit paper on it. I got this on Amazon. Somebody was bragging about it, saying they liked it so much they actually enjoyed sanding. I don't like it that much, but it is better than some of the other, the cheap ones that you go get. It does have the advantage of it's really easy to change the sandpaper, so when it gets dull or worn out, you can replace it. All right, let's see what else. All right, here's my fiberglass resin. I've been using just the canned Bondo stuff. I think it's like 45, but it started off $40 a gallon, which is outrageous, but it was convenient. Now in some places up to $65 a gallon. I think I paid $45 for this one. I caught it before it went up too much, but you have to be careful. All right, so I'm going to put this on there. I'm going to sand it to shape, and then I'm going to put fiberglass on top of it. To put the fiberglass on, I needed to know how much resin do I need. I already could cut these using the template, but I needed to know how much resin to use. You have to excuse the noise. My neighbors are apparently getting ready to take off in their plane. I live on an airport, so that's what the noise is. So I needed to know how much fiberglass do I need. I could guess, but there's an online calculator that you can use. You give it your dimensions in inches and your thickness that you're targeting, and it'll tell you how much in pounds of fiberglass you need. So I came in here, I measured this, it's 5 inches here, measured over here, it's 8 inches, measured this, it's 27 inches. Well, to get the square area and square inches, I would take 27 times the width times the height. In this case, 27 inches, that was easy, it's relatively even, but it's only 5 inches here, it's 8 inches there. What do you do in that case? In this case, I averaged it. So I took 5, 8, added it together, that was 13, divided by 2, that's 7.5. I rounded it up to 8 because I'd rather have a little more resin than a little less. So I went in the calculator and said, okay, I've got a piece that's 27 inches by 8 inches, and I want it to be 100 thousandths thick. I know that because 2 of these layers of fiberglass mat and 1 layer of cloth happens to be right at 100 thousandths of an inch. I only know that because I actually made a piece and then I measured it and it came out to 100 thousandths of an inch. So I give it those numbers and it says, oh, for that you need, I think it was 0.728 pounds of resin. Okay, let's see, a cup of resin is a half a pound, which is 8 ounces. Makes sense, 8 ounces is a half a cup. All right, so what I did is said, oh, well, I need 1.5 pounds, so that's 3 half cups. What did I do? I used these containers and I measured out a half a cup here, a half a cup here, and a half a cup here. I could have done it all in one, but then I'd have to rush and make sure that I got it down before it cured. By doing it in 3 small batches, it gives me a little more working time. And I'm going to put down 3 separate layers, so there was no reason to really do it all in one step. You can if you want. Again, I've been doing this a while. I still choose to take it the safer route, the easier route. All right, what I've determined from my experience with doing this and the speed at which I work is for a cup of resin, I would use a teaspoon of hardener. This is the hardener, the MEKP. It comes with that. All right. So for each one of those half a cup, then I need a half a teaspoon of hardener. All right. I got these at Dollar Tree, a whole set for $1, whole set of the spoons for $1, whole set of the cups for $1. I use them until they get nasty and I throw them away. For $1, it's not worth messing with. I've yet to clean any of these. I just throw them away. All right, up to you. You can clean them if you want. All right, so ideally, I used to have these little containers that I got also at Dollar Tree, little round ones about this big. They have a lid, and I would measure out the half a teaspoon in each one of those. In the move, I lost all of them. It's not worth a trip to Dollar Tree, so I'm just going to do it on the fly. It is better if you mix it ahead of time. That way, that's one less thing you have to worry about when you're working. One of the tools I forgot to mention the other day for shaping is this, again, it's a cheese grater, but it's a small one with a little curve. It allows me to get to something like this. If I wanted to make this curve, this was either body filler or foam, I could come in here with this and I could shape this curve. That would be very difficult to do with any of the other cheese graters because they're big and bulky. So keep this in mind. You're going to find a case where you need this if you're doing anything significant. All right, what else? Here is a spreader. It is for body filler, but you'll see I also use it for fiberglass. Walmart, $1.50 for 3. I've seen them up to $7, $7.50, $8 for the 3. Go to Walmart, save yourself a significant amount of money, percentage-wise. What else? I keep a brush around here because as I do stuff, I need to get the dust off. Okay. If I want to actually clean a surface, I've got rubbing alcohol right here, just the stuff IPA you get from Walmart. I do have several different sanding boards. So this one I have double-sided sticky sandpaper. This is 40 grit. This one right here is the one that doesn't have the handle on it, so it's a little bit flexible, not a lot, but a little bit flexible. It also has the 40 grit on it. And then I have the one here that is the hook and loop, and this is 180 grit paper here. Not really paper, it's cloth if you look. See, it's kind of a cloth stuff. The advantage is just like you see, I can pull it up, clean it off if it gets clogged up, or I can always spray it with water. Another thing I use is here's a sheet of 36 grit paper that you buy, and I got a piece of plastic pipe, cut it to length, and I use some glue it there. I usually glue it to one edge, and I use this to get curved areas. Again, like this. If I wanted this curve right here, I can sit here and just do this. Way easier than trying to get in there with something like that. And of course, you can cut it to different lengths depending on what you need to do. Always have paper towels. You're going to find times that you just plain need. I have water here. The reason I have water is because the Gorilla Glue is activated with water. It says spray. I actually read directions. It says spray one of the areas, one of the surfaces with water, spray the glue on the other, spray the glue evenly on the other, and then put the two together. All right, what else? I think that's got everything. All right, so now to start work. All right, I'm going to use the Gorilla Glue to hold this down because if I use the hot glue, if the hot glue got exposed when I was sanding, it's going to be a hard surface and it's difficult to get it to be even when you go from sanding something very soft to something very hard. I would just use the Gorilla Glue, but it takes a while to set to where the thing is going to stay. When I put this on here, it's flat, so it's a little springy in these low areas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray it. I'm going to put the hot glue on it. Actually, I'm going to put the Gorilla Glue on it, put the hot glue on it. The reason I'm using the hot glue is it cures or hardens, cools in 15 seconds, 30 seconds, something like that. So instead of me having to put the Gorilla Glue on here and hold this thing for a minute or 2 or 5 or however long it takes the Gorilla Glue to actually adhere enough, this is going to do it. So I'll put it down there, push it down, and when I let go, the hot glue will hold it in a couple of spots and then until the Gorilla Glue cures. I'm going to rush it. I'm not going to wait for the Gorilla Glue to cure. All I need it to do is stay in a relative position. Okay, so remember that I really don't care about this thickness or whatever. I just need the top surface. So if this sticks to this bottom surface, fine. If it doesn't stick, I don't care, as long as this top surface ends up correct. Now, if I was going to do this for a permanent piece, I would later, when I pull this off, I'm going to have to pull this off eventually, I would come in here and cut away all of this. This is just extraneous weight. It's not needed once I get a top surface here. I probably won't because I'm just going to make a mold out of this and this extra little weight doesn't matter. But a lot of people are going, oh, you're making this Corvette so heavy, putting 2 layers of material on there. Really? What's a couple hundred pounds? If I need to lose weight on the car, why don't I just go on a diet? Lose 50 pounds myself, and that's the same as losing 50 pounds of fiberglass. Anyway, it's your choice whether to come in and cut this away afterwards or leave it. All right, I think that's got everything. All right, I've been working with this and it's a pain to fight both of these screws, so I'm going to remove this screw just because it has to go, this has to go underneath here, and so it's going to be easier to do that. All right, I need to spray one of the surfaces with water with the Gorilla Glue. I choose to do the foam. You could do either one. All right, so it doesn't say how much to put on there. There's water. All right, I'm gonna do that so the wind doesn't blow it. Now I'm going to take the Gorilla Glue and spread it on this surface. Again, there's really not a good indicator of how much to use, so I'm just going to run a bead. Okay, I know I don't want the glue past there, but I do want that edge down, so I'm going to go, let's say, half an inch or so from there. All right, and then in between, I'm going to go ahead and get that edge, even though theoretically there won't be anything there, so I might end up sanding completely through that. All right, I'm going to do this. There we go. I want to make sure the corners stick. All right, there we go. Gorilla Glue's there. Put the lid back on so I don't cure my Gorilla Glue. All right, take my piece that is wet. Before I put this down, I'm going to put some hot whips. I knew that was going to happen. Put some hot glue, a couple of spots. Oh, there's a spot right there. There's a spot right there. For extension cord. There we go. All right, a little there, a little there. Again, I don't want it too close to the edge because I don't want it exposed. I do have another stick of hot glue, but it's somewhere, I don't right, I'm out of hot glue. All right, so now I take this. I need to get this edge underneath here. Okay, put that against there and hold this down. Now you can see that it's springy, so I'm going to need to hold that down. For spacing, I could just leave it like it is and guess, but you know what? I found out earlier that this piece right here makes a really good spacer, so I'm going to put this in between here, hopefully. Well, this is one of those, on paper this sounded like a great idea. When I tried to do it, it's not so great. There we go. All right, so that's there. I'm going to take this, force it against there. All right, and then I do have to hold it down and in place, so cram it where it goes. And there we go. Hold this in place. This is where another set of hands would really be nice, but I don't have them. All right, so what I'm doing now is holding this down until the hot glue cures. All right, I'm not going to wait on the Gorilla Glue to cure. Okay, ideally I would have weights and stuff on top of here. I'm just too impatient, whatever, to do that. Okay, since I've already got this done, I don't need this anymore. It's spaced correctly. And of course, earlier before I did this, there was no wind at all. And of course, once it's not working, the wind picks up. All right, I have to say that the hot glue is not doing its job. Or not doing it as well as I would like for it to. Not a big deal. You'll see that I'll correct all of this in a little bit. But it would be nice if the hot glue worked. Yeah, the hot glue's not working at all. Let's see, what did I do with my, I have a stick of hot glue out here somewhere. And I don't know where it went. Again, the wind's been blowing all day, so it's been blowing all my supplies everywhere. I just don't understand why the hot glue didn't at least help. Of course, it stuck to the C8. I didn't really want it to. All right. Maybe it hardened before I got the foam down. I'm still looking for that stupid stick of foam. But I don't see it. I'll work without it. Again, because this is already at the right height, that's fine. What I'll probably do is, as it gets closer, I'll put hot glue under the edge. Once I find out where that edge is. I'd lose my head if it wasn't attached. Okay. Well, anyway, that's pretty much where it goes. Sorry, it's going to bother me that I can't find my stupid hot glue. But I'm just going to live with the fact that it's not here. All right. So, plan B. Since I don't have the hot glue, I can use these screws, these drywall screws, and I can screw this down because it only needs to be temporarily held in place. All right. But of course, my drill is inside because I didn't think I'd need it. All right. And when I do put those screws, they're going to be in the way. All right, so I'm going to be careful and try to make this thing play nice. Screw here, this right here. All right, so let's continue as if that worked like it was supposed to. Now what I need to do is I need to shape this. All right, again, that's even with that edge. So what I need to do is get this piece to taper down to where it doesn't exist right where this line is. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take my knife, and I don't need all of this extra material. So even though it's there, let me go ahead and start with my 40 grit. All right. Okay, so this is the sandpaper. It works okay. I do have cheese grater. A lot faster. This. I can also use this right here again, 36 grit. All right, that broke because I scored it right there. Again, not a big deal. That's going to be completely sanded away. Anyway. Like I said, these screws I knew would be in the way, and then this paper right here didn't come off. I can either cut it or sand it. This will take it off a lot quicker. And I'm just going to work around that screw, remove it. Because this doesn't need to be here, I'm going to remove it because this is going to taper down to nothing. Okay, rather than fight with this, I'm going to take my knife and cut it right over here. There we go. Just saves me some time. Same thing here. I don't need this whole edge right here. So I'm going to just trim it away. So again, it's going to go down to absolutely nothing at this edge. So I could use this or, again, sand. Because the foam is so easy to sand, it's just as easy to sand it, except for in a place like that where I don't want to sit there and sand away half an inch. All right. Now you have to be careful when you start getting it this thin because at some point this is going to break off. The foam really has no strength. That's where leaving that paper on the back side wouldn't have been a bad idea because it would have given us a little more strength. All right. Set it right here. Right here, the foam broke. I don't know if you can see, I doubt you can see it, but the foam broke again. If I left the paper there, that wouldn't be an issue. I didn't. Okay, right here, this is loose. I could come in and fill it with hot glue, put another piece of foam underneath. There's a lot of different options I could do. The reason I didn't worry about it, and I'm not going to, is once I get this all smooth and exactly the same, I've got an issue. Okay? If I make this dead level with both of these surfaces, then I'm going to have the 100,000ths additional material on top of it when I put the fiberglass on top there. So this would stick up 100,000ths. Well, I don't want that. So ideally, this is going to be 100,000ths below the surface. So this foam will be right at the bottom edge. This is about 100,000ths too. So this foam would be right at the bottom edge of all of this. I could have and probably should have left the foam a little bit long and stuck it underneath here. That would have at least held this edge where I wanted, but it's a little easier there because now I can make sure the shape is exactly right. So it's a choice of which you would rather do. There's pros and cons to each one. Again, I have a little bit of paper here. I could leave it or I can sand it off. All right, now again, this foam is going to be underneath the fiberglass, so that paper doesn't matter whether it stays there or goes away. All right, so now I have, let's go ahead and sand this. I'm going to sand that dead even. I don't know if you can see, but now the foam's starting to fall off the edge here because it's so thin, paper thin, and it has no strength. Okay. Now there's this peak that I'm probably going to put back in. I could try to make it match it right now, or I can not. At some point, this is the peak's going to go away. So it's not here. You can see there's no peak right there. There's a peak right here, and then obviously the C8 had no peak there. So it's up to me to decide, do I even want that peak there? If I do, then what's it going to look like? I'll decide that later. I can always add the peak in by just putting a piece of foam or whatever to recreate that peak. Okay. This is where that brush comes in right here. Okay, because all that foam's right there, I can just brush away. Got to be careful though, because again, especially in those thin areas, it's really easy to tear up the foam. Okay, so one of the reasons why I've been using the actual body material instead of doing this is because as I'm looking at this, I've got to go, okay, is it flat? Is it smooth? Does it look perfect? Because, you know, ideally this foam is going to be absolutely perfect. So when I put my fiberglass on top of it, it is absolutely perfect. Okay. All right, as I'm sanding away this edge, here's my blue line right here, and it would go all the way through here. I know because of where I put the screw that actually that blue line's way up there. So I have to decide how I want to transition from this down to there. So I do know that across this edge, see, okay, that's what I was talking about. See, the foam just fell apart. I should have left the paper there. That would have prevented that, or I should have been more careful sanding. But it's not up to the blue line, so it's not critical. I just know at this point I need to start being careful. All right, and this is why I have the long boards, okay? I want this to be relatively flat. So by using this long board, there's junk on this, it doesn't matter. Okay, I know it's flat. Using this, I can accidentally move it this way or this way. So all I know is that's flat if I hold it that way, but if I hold it this way, I don't know. By using this piece this way, I know that it's flat. Okay, I probably don't want it exactly flat. I want a little bit of a curve, but again, just by being careful and where and how I sand, I can get the shape I want. All right, I'm knocking the excess material off. And again, that's not from this work I previously did. In this case, the glue's actually helping. All right. move to plug this down. This would be a lot easier to do. I'm being very, very careful when I sand here not to tear up the foam. So when you listen, you can hear. Whoops, see there I did. Okay. All right. So again, because this peak is here, it's not critical that that edge gets lost. I can fix it a little bit. Okay. Now this is, when I do that area over there, this isn't going to be as tough because the foam's going to be, you know, an inch thick. Okay, so it won't be fragile except at the very edge. In this case, because it's only a half an inch thick, it's the thickest. It's more delicate. All right. Now I'm going to take this paper off because at some point I'm going to sand this smooth, and I don't want to be sanding and then all of a sudden run into paper, because that's going to cause an issue. Won't cause a big issue because this paper is going to absorb a lot of the resin. So it'll kind of be, actually be a little bit tougher than the resin without paper. It's basically going to act as a reinforcement for the resin. Now, I've got a bit of an issue right here because this curves up a little bit. I didn't want it to curve up. I want it to go flat from here over. In other words, it comes up on the eyebrow, but all of this is going to be flat and smooth. So I'm going to fix that. This is where my curved piece comes in. This eyebrow needs to stretch to there. And then this needs to go away, this high spot. Okay, now I need to decide what do I want to do about this right here. So I want this. All right, so what I'm going to tell you right now is I am going to do some work here after I get all of this done. So I'm going to accept the fact that this is not going to be perfect right now. I'm going to work on it later. If I wasn't videoing, I would go get, I've got a grinder that has 36 grit. It's a power grinder. It eats this stuff away in like seconds. If I would actually take that power grinder, hit that. I don't want you to wait while I go inside and get my power grinder. All right, so what I'm doing now that I have something to look at, I can figure out, oh, before I couldn't tell how I wanted this to look, but now that I have another surface, I can come here and go, oh, yeah, there we go. That's the shape I want right there. Okay, without that, it was harder, not impossible, much more difficult to decide what I wanted this to look like. Okay, as I sand, I'm starting to sand on the orange. Through the orange, I see the white underneath. Okay. So again, ideally, I will sand through to the white here. I actually had black and primer here because this is what I had sanded through previously. Paint didn't stick at all, and it's just coming up in chips instead of sanding off, which is fine. I don't want it there anyway. Yeah, after I get this sanded to where pretty much I want it, I'm going to put fiberglass on top of this. Then I'm going to come in with that skim coat of body filler. Okay, so that's where I'll make up for, that's why this doesn't have to be exactly the way I want it, because I already know I'm going to have body filler on here. It's catching on this. There's a sharp edge here. Sandpaper's catching on the sharp edge. Okay. Once I get this done and fill it with resin and fiberglass, this sharp edge will go away. So I just want to get it close enough. Okay. And here's where your judgment and eyeball comes in of how do I want that to look. Alright, so what I can do is, you can see this is a little flexy right here. There's actually, used to have a screw here. So what I'm going to do is, once I get the fiberglass cloth and resin on here, I'm going to come in with a screw, one of these little 1 and 5/8 screws, and I'm going to put a screw there and a screw there to pull this back down, ideally to where the surface of the top surface of the fiberglass is dead level with the surface of this deck lid. Doesn't have to be dead level. Again, this doesn't have to be 100 thousandths thick, but I do know from my experiments previously it will be. All right, if it's 50 thousandths thick, that's good enough. All right. Okay, so part of the challenge here is I don't know exactly what I want this shape to look like, and I can't tell, or won't be able to tell, until I actually get this down. I do know that I want it to taper down to nothing, otherwise I have to build this up, which I don't want to do. I'm going to sand this down to nothing. This edge. So when I go to shape this, I'm accepting the fact that I am probably going to end up sanding through the fiberglass in a few spots all the way down to the bone. So I'm going to have to spot fix those areas. I don't mind spot fixing. I hate fixing large areas like this whole fender, but spot fixing, I actually kind of enjoy that. Now I do have my vibrating cutter, and I have sanding discs for it. I could come in here and sand this with that, or I have a detail sander, same thing. I could come in and sand it with this. I probably should do that for speed, but I'm showing you the hard way, the manual way. Okay. So again, it's up to you to decide exactly what shape you want, exactly what contour you want. So if you look at this, okay, because this happens to be about the same way, I can get away with doing this. If this was any wider, I'd want to use the wider sanding board. I did put 2 layers of tape right here. The reason why is because if I just put one, I sand through it. As soon as I sand through the one, I'm going to be sanding on my trunk, and I don't want to do that. So I put 2 so that as soon as I see it sand through, I see it sand through, I can stop and go, uh-oh, I don't want it to mess up my C8 trunk, so I better stop there. Okay, so I can see that I should have come in and cut this right there. I didn't do it, so this is going to be a trouble area. When I get there, it's going to require, again, spot fixing. Notice how apparently the Gorilla Glue is starting to cure, because now this thing is starting to stick down. Okay, I wouldn't trust it with any kind of load, but I trust it enough to stay in place. Again, with very little load or stress on it. Okay. Again, the advantage I have is I still have this much all the way across here, so where this falls or if it comes off, it isn't a big deal. All right. When it starts getting thin, you can tell when you're sanding. Okay. And again, the way I came up with this line was I put a straight edge. That's the closest thing I've straight edge right here, right there. Okay, and so ideally when it's done, that shouldn't be there unless, in this case, I really do want a little bit of a peak right there. But if I wanted that absolutely flat, when I put it here, it would touch there, it would touch there, and then it would be just exact. This would not rock. But I actually do want it to have a little bit of a peak there. I've got this tapering down to almost nothing right there, which is what I want. Okay, I can continue on. It's up to me to decide, do I want to make this go down to nothing and risk it breaking off and making a step, or do I want to be safe and leave a little more? Again, personal choice. Now in my case, I actually do want it to break off because I don't mind there being a step there. I will fix it with the fiberglass. Okay, whether you want that or not, it's up to you, but you can see that is literally paper thin. Okay, now I've gotten to the point where I have this pretty much the shape I want, through to about right there, and then this screw is right in the way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the screw. I only put it in a couple of threads because it's more a marker than any kind of folding tool. Alright, so now I'm going in and contouring the area that the screw kept me from being able to easily get to. Okay, again, I know that that screw is on this line. If you look here, the screw's on the line. So I can go all the way up to there and meet my original contour where I planned on it being. Alright, I'm going to use my brush here. When you brush this, be careful. Obviously, I don't want to brush that way because I would break off that edge. Over here, I can do it in either direction. And again, I can brush down as long as I don't brush up. Okay. Now, we're going to look at what I got. Okay, it's about a 1/16 of an inch thick here, which I don't want. So I need to come in and taper that down. It's actually 1/16 of an inch about there, all the way across here. So I still have more sanding to do. Okay, I'm down to where it's starting to break away because it's getting so thin. And again, I don't care. Because I'm going to fix it with my fiberglass. So when you think about it, this foam is really nothing but a spacer. It's a spacer to space the fiberglass up to the height that I want it to be. And it gives me the surface contour that I want. But it doesn't have to be perfect because of that. All right, this right here, there's more of a step right there. And because this makes the transition, I'm going to use the curved piece. Now let me warn you, when you're using this curved piece, it's even that much easier to accidentally tear the foam because it's got a single contact point. With that, the contact point's always the whole width of there as long as I hold that flat. This one, contact point, ideally, theoretically, is a point. It's very easy to tear a point away. So what I'm going to do now is I want it to taper to this. I wanted a peak there, okay? Now if I try to sand this right there, I'm going to get rid of this little bit of a peak that I have right through here, okay? I don't want to do that. I want that peak there, not a big peak, but just enough that this isn't an absolutely flat surface. It doesn't go from a curve here to absolutely flat. It still has a tiny bit of a curve there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure this, instead of putting it there, I'm going to put it right there, all right? So that's going to ensure that it tapers off at the edge. And again, see, that is literally, not literally, but real close to taper there. Okay. I am using very little touch. I'm almost just using the weight of this as I go across here. There we go. Now I'm starting to see my blue line, and that's actually what I wanted, so that's why I'm not worried about it. But again, I have to be careful. I'm getting a little sloppy here. Okay, I want this, really want this area to go down that blue line because I need this to go thinner. In order for this to go thinner and it not to have a step, that has to go thinner. Okay. And again, I'll show you in a minute when I put the fiberglass down. You'll see why I'm not worried about that breaking off right there. Again, if I didn't want it to break off, I would have left the paper underneath. That would have kept that from happening because the paper, I would sand through to the paper. I also would have glued it all the way to the edge of the paper. Because obviously once you get this thin, it could lift up. How do I know when I'm at the edge? You can hear it scratching because it's making a scratching noise when I sand this. It doesn't make a scratching noise when I sand. So right there I can say, oh, I'm all the way down to where I'm actually, okay, I shouldn't have done that. All right. Okay, so when I say I shouldn't have done that, it's not a big deal. It just means that it probably would have been a tiny bit less work if I wouldn't have done that. It just means when I put the fiberglass down, I'm going to have to be a little more diligent. But again, there's the blue line, so I'm still below the blue line. What I don't want to happen is when I get the fiberglass on top of here and I sand through, I don't want to sand through the fiberglass and hit the foam because that's an area I'm going to have to fix. I don't ever want foam exposed. Okay, that's really, really smooth. And I can see the blue line right there. Okay, and because I want this to be even, now I'm going off at the 45-degree angle each way to get this to go down. Not only did that break, it cramped it up underneath. This is all down to almost nothing right here. It's a little thick. So again, that's pretty good. Okay, I do see a little bit of movement right here, so I'm going to would, but I don't want it to be obvious. I don't want it to go, oh look, I can see that. And again, people ask why I didn't do the whole car this way. Well, this is why. Okay, it's tedious work. Okay, getting this down. Where do I stop? Where do I start? What do I do? By doing it the way I did over here, all I can do is get the two ends of the panel in the right place, and everything in between is automatically taken care of. So it's a personal preference thing. Which way would you rather work? I don't know that either way is better than the other. It's just which way would you rather work? You know what? I think that's probably as good as I'm going to get. Again, if you weren't watching, I would go get that razor and fix this. I'll fix it later. What I'm going to end up doing is gouging this out, putting a thin layer of fiberglass just to tie the two together, and then putting body filler in between. I would just use body filler, but the problem is it could crack by having fiberglass tied together. It will crack. So the body, the fiberglass whacked is a nice base. Add some strength. And again, remember, when we put these screws in, it's going to lower this just a little bit. So it's also going to help this. So you can see what's happening is this fiberglass right here, again, it was 100 thousandths thick. It's tapering down to virtually nothing right there. There's actually a knife edge right there. So as I keep sanding, what I'm doing is I'm moving that edge over this way. And it's up to me, where do I stop? All right, let me get my brush and see what I've got here. Okay, so now that you've seen what I've done, it would be up to you to decide which would have been easier. To have cut this right here, and actually I would have cut it slightly inside there. Screw this up, raise this bottom piece up to this level, and then just fiberglass the edge right here. This curve would already be taken care of because it's built into there. Or was it better to use the foam like I did here? And just reshape it like this. Again, the disadvantage is if I wasn't very good at this surface could be real wavy, real uneven. I'm not saying it's not. I'll find out later on. I don't think it is, of course. Otherwise, I would be fixing it. So I'm having the same thing here, where it's down to paper thin, which is fine. I actually want it to be paper thin. Okay, so I knew at some point it would do that. Again, it's breaking off just like it did down here. Okay, see, now it's breaking off to that blue line, which again, ideally I wanted it to do. So since it's the blue line's right there, let me go ahead and show you. So there's the blue line. Right there. Okay. So my question is, do I sand this off until I get to that blue line? Now, of course, since the Sharpie's wet, it's a blue smeared line. This is fine. Wow, that came out really nice. Okay, so now it's starting to tear again. Now I could come in here with a knife and cut this edge. Then I have to be really careful not to tear it. Alright, so a little bit here. There's a peak right here I don't want. So if I sand from here, it drags that peak over. If I sand from the inside, it gets rid of the peak. Alright, one more thing. I can see there's a bit of a step right here that I don't want. But part of that's because the foam is lifting up instead of going down. Foam's not holding down right here, and I really don't want this to be up. I don't want an air gap under there. So I am going to find my knife. I'm actually going to go ahead and cut the foam away there, and then right there. There we go. Okay. That. Okay. That, come in with the sandpaper. Just a little bit. All right, it's not perfect, but in the interest of time, it is close enough. All right, so what's the next step? All right, take the brush. So this is the second disadvantage of using the foam. Now I'm going to add the fiberglass. Well, the fiberglass is 100 thousandths thick. And so it's going to raise up this 100 thousandths. So when I'm done, this will actually stick up above the surface all around here, which I obviously don't want. I want it to be exactly smooth. What I could do is go in here and sand another 100 thousandths down from this surface so that it's a step, and that would be perfect. Problem is, that's a lot harder to do than just trying to get it in. Okay, so rather than do that, I'm just going to put it on here, live with it being a little high, and I will actually probably come in, pull this off, pull this foam out, and then put it back down, the fiberglass shell back down. And honestly, this thickness is probably about a little more than 100 thousandths because it tapers down to nothing here. I can lay it against the edge down here, lift it up to the right height here, and it'll work. If I do, just like I'm doing, oops, again, that's also why I don't really care about this edge as much, because I'm going to have to fix this edge anyway because of that 100 thousandths difference. So when I get this through, that won't be down to 0. It'll be down to 100 thousandths. So, even though I got this to where it's all nice, tapered down to nothing and all that, because I know what's coming up. Okay. The advantage of doing it like this is that I can eyeball it from here, okay? So I can get down here and go, hey, is that curve what I want it to be? Okay. If I had the 100 thousandth step there, I'd have to look at it and go, hey, is that curve plus 100 thousandths what I want it to be? So right now, I can look across the edge and I can see that this literally smoothly blends up here. Okay, so it's a little easier to see what's going on. The other way would be a little more difficult. All right. And again, it's up to you how perfect you want this to get. I'm not a perfectionist. I used to be, I'm not anymore. I just want to get close enough. All right. Again, if I didn't know about that 100,000th step, I would not be doing this. But because I know there's a 100,000th step that I'm going to have to deal with, it's not a big deal that I have a little bit of a step right there. There we go. Okay. Now, there is a temptation to sit here and work on this again, but I already know if I do, it's just going to break off again, so I'm not even going to mess with it. What's the next step? Next step is put some resin down. My half a cup of resin. My spatula to mix it. Something you have to watch out for is butterflies and moths, for some reason, are attracted to the resin and the orange paint. And so I have a butterfly or a moth in my mixture. Not a big deal. All right, some people are freaking out because of stuff. It's going to be covered up, so I don't care if there's a moth in there. All right, so half a cup, half a teaspoon, hardener, chip brush. All right. Now, once you put this hardener in there, it starts hardening from the second that the two contact each other. Okay, you have about 5-10 minutes. I don't know, I haven't ever timed it. But when you're first starting, it seems like it's, a couple of minutes. Okay. As you get better at this, it doesn't seem like it's nearly so bad. All right, notice I have these little plastic things. Those are the lids that come on here because there's two of those containers of hardener in there. Okay, don't throw those away. They're handy. When I get through mixing this, also be careful, don't splash this on yourself. And unlike me, you should be wearing gloves. And you probably should be wearing a mask too, but I don't do either of those. Do as I say, not as I do. Okay, the thing when you do this is make sure that you go around the edge with the spatula. Again, $1.25 spatula from Dollar Tree. Okay, because you don't want raw resin without any hardener mixed in, because it will literally never harden. Okay, so by making sure that you get it mixed in there thoroughly, everything's going to harden correctly. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just getting rid of the excess here. You don't have to do this, but this way, otherwise, this builds up, and after a couple of times using this, you have this huge, thick thing of resin on here. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to paint this on here. Now, all this is for is so that the fiberglass material has something to stick to. Now, if I had been using that pink foam right now, it would literally start eating away at the foam. So I would have had to put some kind of barrier layer in between here to make sure that didn't happen. But because I'm using this foam instead of the pink foam, I don't have to worry about that. So I've saved myself some work. Now, remember how this lifted up on the edge? So what I'm doing is I'm carefully painting up. What this is doing is getting resin underneath here. So it's going to act as glue to kind of glue the edge. Okay. Again, I only mixed the half a cup at a time, so I am running low. If I'd mixed the whole amount, I'd still have a whole thing. The other thing to keep in mind is that the speed at which this cures depends on the volume. The more you have, the faster it's going to cure. So by mixing this only a half a cup at a time, I gave myself some extra time, as opposed to if I would have mixed all three of these together at a half a cup, it would cure way faster than this will by itself. Okay, doesn't really matter how smooth this is, because I'll show you what's going to happen. All right, got that down. Put this aside. My first layer of fiberglass mat right here. If you notice, I marked this. I said, oh, there's the center of the car, there's the top of this, there's the outside. You don't have to do that, but when you get 3 of these for every place that you're doing, like when I was doing the fender, you're rushing, trying to get all this done, and you're panicking on, oh, where does it go, and how does it go, and all that. And by making those marks, I know exactly where it goes. Okay, there we go. Okay, now the next step is I want to soak this. Okay, I want this mat to completely be soaked through. Okay, you don't want to brush it, because if you do, see what happens? I pick up these little hairs. What you want to do is you want to dab it. Okay, there is a lot of things on the internet that says, oh, take these chip brushes and cut them down so that they're, you know, half that thickness and they're really stiff, and you can just really jab this in. I did that. First off, it's hard to do because the bristles move when you try to cut them, and I didn't really see that it helped a whole lot, so I don't even mess with that. It's an extra step that to me is not necessary. Okay, this is the disadvantage of only mixing up as much as I think I need at a time. I'm out. Okay, so all I wanted to do here is make sure I get around all the edges. Okay, so what happens is the resin, there's a binder material in this fiberglass mat, and it's what holds it together. These are all a bunch of little, you know, 1.5 inch, 2 inch strands of glass fiber. And so what holds them together is this binder material. Well, the chemical composition of the polyester resin eats away at that binder material. So after a couple of seconds, this thing is no longer a sheet. It's a whole bunch of little fibers, and if I brush it, I will move those around as I brush it. So you don't want to do that. When you're very first starting, you can get away with a little bit of brushing, but once the polyester resin starts attacking or dissolving the binder material, then you're kind of screwed. All right, good enough. That's one down. Okay, if you want to get it all out, take it like that. Not that it matters. Do you really care about that tiny bit of resin? I don't. Okay, done with that one. Mix up the next one. This is where these little things come in, and this is the lid to that. There. If I didn't have that to put it on, I have to figure out what do I do with that brush while I'm mixing up the next batch. I put the lids on because, like I showed you, butterflies and bees and moths are strangely attracted to this stuff. Okay, so by putting that on there, I just probably saved the life of a bee or a moth or a butterfly or whatever. Again, if I had that separate container, I would just take it and dump it in, but it's not that big a deal to do that. Okay. I'm not ultra careful because I've been doing this long enough that it doesn't matter if it cures a couple of seconds faster, a couple of minutes faster, a couple of minutes slower. You will probably want to be more careful when you're mixing this. The advantage of the larger container, this is a cottage cheese container, the other was a sour cream, is I don't have to be as careful. It splashes more when you use the small one. The bigger one doesn't splash as much. It still splashes, So you still have to be careful. Again, I'm going around the edge and pushing the resin from the edge to the center all the way to the bottom, making sure I get in the corners. Then once I do that, then I can just stir it. But I want to make sure that that stuff that's clinging to the edges is not pure resin. Okay, same thing. Pull this out. Wipe that down. And again, I don't have to wipe it down. I could just throw it in there, but then I know what happens is at some point this actually ends up getting glued in there. All right, I'm going to clean out the brush by doing that and go again. I could pour this like that and then spread it, personal preference. Now it changes color as it cures, so you probably can't see it, but I can for sure. The stuff that I've already put down is turned tan. Okay, the stuff that I am putting down right now has kind of a more reddish tint to it. Okay, so as it cures, it changes colors. So I can look at it and go, oh, there's the cured stuff. The red stuff is the uncured stuff. Okay. Now it is curing fast because I purposely mixed it what we call a little hot. I put a little extra resin in there because I knew I'd be videoing and I know that I'm fast enough that it's not going to harden on me. But if I were not fast, I would be screwed right now. If I had mixed this whole batch together, all three of them, and if I wasn't fast, I would be screwed right now because it would be hardening in this container. It gets to a point where it is literally a gel and it won't spread at all. Okay. All right. Okay. This is already hardened. Okay. I mean, I can scrape it with my fingernail, but I mean, it's no longer a liquid. That's just the stuff that I did on the first pass. Okay. And now I can get away brushing it because that stuff that's underneath has enough of a surface to it. All right, because I've done this before and I know what's going on, I am not going to put another layer of matte on this because it's looking good. I mean, there's enough thickness there that it's going to hold its surface. If I do put another layer, then it's going to raise it up another 40, 50 thousandths. By doing this, now I don't have to deal with that extra 40 or 50 thousandths. Okay? So, plans change. Okay, same thing. Take this, get the excess out. Now the brush is starting to get a little bit hard. See, it's no longer flexible. Again, that's because I mixed it hot. If I would have been real careful and made sure I didn't put any extra hardener in there, that wouldn't be the case. Okay, so the next step would be, normally I would put down another layer of matte and do the same thing. In this case, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to skip that step. It's exactly like what I've done. And I'm going to put the cloth down. I could have cut the cloth to exactly the shape that I needed. I didn't. I just said, okay, I'm just wasting cloth by doing this. Not a big deal. Okay. All right, the advantage of the cloth now is that I can sit here and run across it and it won't mess it up. It won't mess the fibers because it is a cloth. Okay, so what I can do now is, there we go, get the cloth to lay down. The reason why I'm rushing is because I want the cloth to lay down before all of that resin underneath hardens. Once that resin underneath hardens, I'm not good enough to get the mat to lay completely flat. I could use a roller. I've got a roller and I could use it, but I don't. So by doing this, there's lumps and bumps in that. And this, by putting it down before those lumps and bumps harden, I can take this, run it across here, smooth it out, and that's what this is for. Okay, now I can take this thing, run across here, and get it relatively flat and smooth. It's not going to be perfect, but I don't need it to be perfect. I just need it. This is going to reduce the amount of body work I have to do after the fact. Okay, so the smoother, nicer I get this, the less work I'm going to have to do later. And since I'm into doing as little work as possible, that's going to work. Okay. So, honestly, I mixed it a little hotter than I should have, because right now, if I hadn't mixed it so hot, I would be able to fix some of these bumps in here. I can't fix them because it's too hard. All right. But I still have another half a cup to work with. So I'll take this, mix my hardener in here. Now, honestly, I don't need this half a cup. I can look at it and see that that's more than I'm going to need. Not a big deal. Don't try to use up the excess just to keep from wasting it. You're going to find out that you're just going to have to sand it off. So why do I want to add material that I'm just going to have to sand off later? I don't want to do that. All right, so the same thing. Mix it up here real good. I could go get another brush. I'll see what that brush is like. It could be so hardened that it's worthless. The brushes are cheap if you buy them in bulk like I do. I think it's a pack of 96 of them or something like that. It's not bad. If you buy them one by one, they get kind of pricey. They're like twice as expensive, 3 times as expensive if I just go to Home Depot and get them. So I try to avoid doing that. Yeah. See, this brush is like rock hard. It's more like a squeegee now instead of a brush. Okay. I do have another brush sitting over there because I anticipated this might happen. Okay, now I can brush this on because I have cloth here instead of resin. Okay, but the surface underneath, it's hard. Okay, there's no give to it at all. Okay, the smoother I get this resin on here, the less sanding I'm going to have to do later. And you know me, I hate doing extra work. Okay, I have a choice. I could leave this edge without soaking it with resin, or I can go ahead and soak it with resin and glue it down at the edge. That's what I'm doing. Same thing up here on this. Okay, I could try to not get any resin on this top edge, or I can just go ahead and say, yeah, I'm going to get resin on there. Again, I choose the latter option. I can come in with my vibrating tool, cut along this edge, because in case you hadn't realized it, I'm actually gluing the trunk shut by doing this. Luckily, I'm gluing the masking tape, but it still won't open. If I were to let this harden and attempt to open the trunk, it would not open because of that. Okay, this is that area where it was kind of weird, so I'm putting extra resin here, give myself more material to work with. Okay, if I would have gotten that perfectly flat, smooth, and beautiful, I wouldn't do that. Okay. The other thing is I tend to put extra resin down, and the reason why is because fiberglass has this reputation to be nasty to work with. As you can see, when I'm putting it down, it's not nasty, it's just some cloth and some mat. The mat is can be a little bit nasty, but the cloth definitely isn't. It's when you sand it that it causes the problem. When you sand it, the material breaks up into little bitty glass fibers, and what you think is you itching isn't you itching actually. It's these little glass fibers stabbing you. Okay. So what I do is I purposely put down too much resin, make it thick. That way the first few layers of sanding that I do, I'm not even sanding the fiberglass material. I'm literally just sanding resin. Okay, so that gives me a little bit of an edge to where I can sand it. If I was really good at laying this down, and if I wouldn't have mixed it so hot, this would be really close to the surface, and I probably would never even sand through the resin. The disadvantage is it makes it heavy. The cloth gives it the strength, fiberglass is strength. The resin just ties it together. The resin weighs a whole lot. The cloth is really light. So if you mix it correctly, you end up with the lightest, strongest material you can get. If you mix it resin heavy like I do, you end up with a relatively heavy piece of material. Okay. All right. It's up to you how much you keep doing this and getting it smooth and all of that. There's stuff called peeled ply. It's a material that you put on top of there, and you can put it on there and use the squeegee and squeegee it flat with the peel ply. Okay, the advantage of that is the peel ply has a really fine grain to it, and you end up with a surface that basically needs very, very, very little work. I don't know what happened to my peel ply. I bought it. As you may know, I moved here from Dallas, and I had a shop up there, and I lost the shop because I sold it with the house. So everything got packed. So I do not know where the peel ply is. If I did, this is one of those cases where I would use it. If you're really good with laying down the material using this, you don't need the peel ply. It's not cheap. None of this is cheap. So somebody asked me how much I'd spent doing this, and I said, oh, about $2,000. Well, there's another guy that's building his own supercar, and he's more, let's see, particular than I am. And he did a cost analysis. He actually tracked everything. I just guess. So I thought about $2,000. He's already spent $3,000 on his material building his body. So honestly, the bodies are all pretty much the same size. So I'm going to take his number and say I've spent $3,000 plus. I think he's bought stuff in bulk. I didn't. That stuff's obscenely expensive if you don't buy it in bulk. So I might even have $4,000 by the time I'm done in this body. Okay, again, because I mixed it hot, it's already getting hard. When I run this across there, I don't know if you can hear it, but it's rubbing across a hard surface. Okay, if I would have mixed it cold, then that would not be the case. This would still be pretty liquid, and you wouldn't hear it. But I mean, it is literally, okay. Now, I like working hot. The reason why is because 10 or 15 minutes from now, I can start sanding. Okay, if I mix it cold, it's going to take an hour, half an hour, whatever, for it to harden. All right, that's it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at my handiwork. So I'm going to come over here and look and see that, you know what, it looks pretty good. That thing is going to, so now, after it hardens, now is when I'm going to use these things and shape this, get rid of it. Right now it's lumpy, you can't see it, or maybe you can, but it's a little bit lumpy. There's a spot right there where something isn't quite right, and I can see that it's not perfectly flat. But again, it's awfully close. There's a high spot right there. You're always going to end up with high and low spots unless you're just really, really good at this, which I'm not. So that's it, honestly. I don't think you want to sit here and wait for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever for this to harden so that I can start sanding. So I'm going to go ahead and stop now. Go ahead, like, subscribe, hit the alert. The other thing, shout out to Rick Corvette Conti. He called me up and we did a phone interview. I listened to it this morning. He published it this morning. Did an awesome job of taking my videos, splicing them together, and combining that with the phone call. I thought it was going to be a short blurb on his Coffee with Conti. It was most of the content this morning. He did cover the auction where the first Z06 got auctioned off for $3.3 million, I think, or something like that. But anyway, the rest of the show was talking about me and my car and what's going on. I was really shocked. He's positive. So many. Here's the thing is, on the internet, if you do negative view stuff, you get a lot of views. I mean, people, for some reason, they love the negative stuff. He didn't do that. He did neutral, if not neutral, positive, somewhere between neutral and positive. I actually think it was positive. You tell me after you see it. I thought it was great. I was expecting to get blasted to death by Corvette people because obviously that's who he caters to. And there's a couple of negative comments, but not a whole lot. So I was pleasantly surprised. So shout out to Rick Corvette Conti. Thanks a lot for doing that. Anyway, go ahead and search for that and look at that. It's not quite, it's tacky, but it's flat, smooth, looking good. So I'm pleasantly surprised with this. I'm glad I was able to get this much done. So next time, or I might do it in between, I'm not sure on the video. I gotta do the same thing over here. I gotta add this. I'll probably do this in foam too. I'm going to put a skim coat of body filler on top of here, sand it smooth. Anyway, it's just a process, so we're going through it. Everyone have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.